Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2021 Annual Meeting of Stockholders of Philippine Realty and Holdings Corporation. Allow me to call the Corporate Secretary, Attorney Rex P. Bonifacio, to do the honor of introducing the members of the Board of Directors.
Thank you. Joining us in this meeting to broadcast the following: Mr. Gerardo Domenico Antonio V. Lanuza. Mr. Lanuza is the chairman of the board and at the same time the chairman of the executive committee. He is also a member of the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee, Procurement Committee, and Retirement Plan Committee. Mr. Renato G. Nunez. Mr. Nunez is the vice chairman of the board and an independent director. He is also the chairman of the Audit Committee and Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee. Mr. Nunez is likewise a member of the Executive Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and Related Party Transaction Committee. Mr. Gerardo O. Lanuza Jr., Chairman Emeritus and member of the Executive Committee and Procurement Committee. Mr. Antonio O. Olves, Vice Chairman Emeritus. Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr. Mr. Del Rosario is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the company and at the same time the Chairman of Retirement Plan Committee, Management Committee, and Project Committee. He is also a member of the Executive Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and Related Party Transaction Committee. Mr. Edmundo C. Medrano. Mr. Medrano is the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and Treasurer of the company. He is also a member of the Board Risk Oversight Committee, Retirement Plan Committee, Management Committee, and Project Committee. Mr. Gregory Yang. Mr. Amador C. Bacani. Mr. Bacani is a member of the Executive Committee, Audit Committee, Procurement Committee, and Retirement Plan Committee. Mr. Andrew C. Nang. Mr. Nang is a member of the Procurement Committee. Mr. Alfonso Martin E. Esmendi. Mr. Esmendi is an independent director and chairman of the Board Risk Oversight Committee and Related Party Transaction Committee. He is also a member of the Audit Committee and Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee. Mr. Joe Mark O. Arolado. Mr. Arolado is an independent director and chairman of the Procurement Committee. He is also a member of the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and Related Party Transaction Committee. Also joining us are the key officers of the company and guests.
And now to preside over this meeting at Quezon City, our chairman, Mr. Gerardo Domenico Antonio Lanuza.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting will now come to order. Mr. Corporate Secretary, have notices been duly sent as required by our bylaws?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A copy of the notice of today's meeting was published in print and online format in Business Mirror and Business World on June 8 and 9, 2021 respectively, in compliance with the notice dated April 20, 2020 of the Securities and Exchange Commission. As proof thereof, we have the affidavit of publication executed by Leonida G. Garcia, Credit and Collection Staff of Business Mirror, dated June 10, 2021, certifying that a copy of the Notice of Annual Stockholders Meeting was published in print and online format in accordance with the notice dated April 20, 2020 of the SEC.
Mr. Corporate Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Mr. Chairman, there are present in this meeting shareholders owning 3,649,110,574 shares, representing 74.13% of 4,922,324,999 907 total outstanding shares of the corporation as of March 31, 2021 record date. Therefore, there is a quorum and this meeting may proceed.
Our Corporate Secretary, Attorney Bonifacio, will now share the rules of conduct for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rules of conduct for this meeting are set forth in the definitive information statement submitted by the corporation to the SEC. I would just like, Mr. Chairman, to highlight some points to our shareholders who are joining us in our live webcast. Stockholders who have registered and voted on or before the deadline as provided in the definitive information statement and notice of stockholders meeting shall be considered for purposes of determining the quorum. All questions, comments, or clarifications shall be addressed to the chairman of the meeting and shall be entertained, read, and responded to during the question and answer or after the other matter. The moderator of the meeting shall read the question. It shall be responded to by whoever the chairman of the meeting may appoint or designate from the members of the board or officers of the corporation. Stockholder may send their questions, comments, or clarifications on matters related to the items on the agenda through the comment box found below the link www.PhilRealtyASN.com. The company will endeavor to answer all questions, comments, or clarification not answered or responded to during the question and answer for whatever reason shall be responded to via email. The meeting is being recorded in compliance with the guidelines on online meeting issued by the SEC, and by joining our live webcast, stockholders are deemed to have given their consent thereto. And lastly, in compliance with the revised Corporation Code of the Philippines, I will be reporting the voting results after the discussion of each item on the agenda, and the same shall be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. That is all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the reading and approval of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting held on August 20th, 2020. A copy of the minutes of last year's annual meeting is posted on the company's website. Are there any comments on the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully move that the reading of the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held on August 20, 2020 be dispensed with, and that the same be approved and ratified as recorded. I am Ms. Maria Cristina Pirillo, a proxy holder.
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion. I am Mr. Dennis Aguilar, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the reading of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting of the corporation held on August 20, 2020 be dispensed with, and that the same be approved and ratified as recorded. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we know voting results for this item on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, shareholders owning 3,649,110,574 shares, representing 74.13% of 4,922,324,907 total outstanding shares represented in this meeting, voted in favor of the approval of the minutes of the last stockholders meeting held on August 20, 2020.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is carried. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of the annual report of the Board of Directors. 2020 was a year like no other. The pandemic has changed the way we live, work, communicate, and even breathe. It brought about challenges to all the industries in the country, the real estate industry included. But as they say, we don't grow when things are easy. We grow when we face challenges. And PhilRealty, we are happy and proud to say, has continued to grow in the last year in spite of the pandemic. To further illustrate this feat, allow me to call on our President and CEO, Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., to present to us the state of your company in the past year, as well as present the future ventures. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. our stockholders, members of the board of directors, my colleagues at PhilRealty, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am pleased to share with you today the accomplishments of your company and what it has achieved in 2020, as well as our current and future endeavors. But before I dwell into those two topics, allow me first to briefly depict the real estate landscape in the country during the past year, which has consequently affected the results of our efforts. The COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented phenomenon in our modern history, bringing about difficulties and changing the way we live, the way we eat, the way we work, and even the way we breathe. Companies and organizations from various sectors and industries, the real estate industry included, have been greatly affected, causing unfortunate outcomes. But while the pandemic has significantly affected housing markets around the world, reports have held that the Philippines appeared to be an outlier and has experienced increasing demand for luxury and upscale properties. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas second quarter 2020 Residential Real Estate Price Index recorded the highest year-on-year growth on nationwide property prices, with a 27% jump. This is the highest since 2016. And according to the BSP, the stronger demand for high-end projects serves as a key driver in increasing the average price per square meter. This upward trend, reports disclose, is based on the rationale that residential real estate is a need, and amid the pandemic, people will still purchase real estate properties. Now that having a safe home is amplified, more people have realized the importance of investing in a high-quality home for their families, especially those that provide generous spaces to accommodate various home activities. Having said that, allow me now to present the company's financial results, given that backdrop on the premium real estate segment in the country. In 2020, your company posted a consolidated net income after tax of more than 39 million pesos. While this is a decline compared to the 484 million net income after tax reported in the same period in the previous year, we are nevertheless glad that in spite the devastating impact of COVID, we still ended on a positive income figure. To further explain, let me run you through the highlights of our 2020 financial statements. Our total revenues for the last year amounted to 705.3 million compared to the 1.88 billion of 2019. 264.8 million or 37.5% of total revenues came from the sale of real estate. The sale of units at Sky Villas Tower accounted for a significant portion of this figure, augmented by the sale of units at Skyline Tower and at Icon Plaza located in Bonifacio Global City or BGC. Meanwhile, 440.6 million of total revenues was attributed to rent, management fees, interest gain, and revaluation of investment properties. This is a decrease of 370 million compared to the 12 months ending December 2019. At year-end 2020, total assets were at 6.1 billion compared to the previous year's 6.19 billion, a slight decrease of 89 million pesos. Our total real estate inventory stood at about 111,000 square meters. Your company's current ratio increased from 2.91:1 to 5.15:1 from 2019 to 2020, mainly due to a combined increase in current liabilities and decrease in current assets. This current ratio of 5.15 is to 1 is quite healthy. Similarly, PhilRealty's debt-to-equity ratio remained good and conservative as the company's financial leverage marginally decreased, closing at 0.54 is to 1. The asset-to-equity ratio of the company also showed steadiness over time, as it only slightly adjusted from 1.57 to 1 in 2019 to 1.54 is to 1 in 2020. The steady performance of debt-to-equity ratios and asset-to-equity ratios of the company clearly demonstrates that the real estate business side is currently being financed primarily by funds provided by its shareholders and a relatively small amount of debt. The performance of the company's book value per share has also been encouraging. It has been consistently improving from 84 centavos per share to 85 centavos. Our net worth consequently increased to 3.97 billion, up by more than 37 million, or about a 1% increase. Let me now share with you the high points of our operations in 2020. The year saw your company focusing on the sale of the remaining units in Sky Villas, completely selling all units by year-end. It also embarked on upgrading a number of Skyline units to the premier category, with 12 units completed during the year. With an almost sold-out number of units, your company is then putting its attention to the planning and design of the remaining towers in the One Balete compound in New Manila, Quezon City. Naturally, these soon-to-launch towers will be of the same premium quality as its predecessors, Skyline and Sky Villas. Doing what we do best, we will design these buildings to be elegant and to feature upscale architecture and interior design, to include amenities and services that are meant to complement the lifestyle of our distinct clients. Also, in the horizon is another residential project in one of the 2 lots in BGC that your company has acquired recently by way of an asset exchange from Green Hills Properties Incorporated, or GPI, our principal shareholders. This property is set to be the site of a signature and distinguished vertical home in the area, promising unparalleled lifestyle complement. Moreover, your company likewise envisions expanding its footprint in locations outside of Metro Manila, with special keen eye on San Juan, La Union, and Baguio City, where we currently own good-sized properties. We believe venturing into the development of these assets would strengthen and make your company more profitable. Given the magnitude of these plans, we are cognizant of the need for significant financial resources to turn them into reality. In that regard, we are very heartened with the high level of trust and confidence that we have so far garnered from our principal shareholders, as well as from the banking institutions that have supported us. As the pandemic and its effects persist, trust that the company will continue to adapt and innovate in order to generate more sales and leasing revenues, but always anchored in our core values and established unique proposition. And as more banking and other investment partnerships are forged and strengthened, we are convinced that we will be able to acquire the needed resources to bring the plans to fruition. It is also our hope that by doing so, it will further reinforce the trust of our clients and stakeholders in our commitment to produce the best results and to increase values for them. As proven by our success in the past years with strategic planning, precise and thoughtful acquisition and use of resources, and the right balance of business acumen and foresight, and always guided by our board of directors, your PhilRealty management is confident that we will be able to continue to deliver in our commitment to further grow the business and transform landscapes in the city, the metropolis, and beyond. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
The chair will now entertain a motion for the approval of the annual report and the audited financial statements for the year ended 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the annual report and the audited financial statements for the year ended 2020 be approved, ratified, and confirmed. I am Mr. Joey Jimena, a proxy holder.
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion. I am Mr. King Anthony Tan, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the annual report and the audited financial statements for the year ended 2020 be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we know the voting results for this item on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, shareholders owning 3,649,110,574 shares, representing 74.13% of 4,922,324,907 total outstanding shares represented in this meeting, voted in favor of the approval of the annual report and the audited financial statement for the year ended 2020.
Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The motion is carried. We shall now proceed with the ratification of all acts and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers since the last annual stockholders meeting held on August 20, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I move that all acts, resolution, contracts, deed and proceeding of Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers of the Corporation since the last annual stockholders meeting held on August 20, 2020, and up to today's meeting of the Board of Directors and its committees and the report submitted by the SEC, PSE, and other regulatory bodies, and all acts, proceedings performed or taken pursuant thereto be approved, ratified, and confirmed. I am Mr. Dennis Aguilar, a proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am Mr. Joey Jimena, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that all acts, contracts, deeds, and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers of the Corporation since the last annual stockholders meeting and up to today's meeting as set forth or reported in the minutes of the meetings of the Board of Directors and its committees, in the reports submitted by the Corporation to the SEC, PSE, and other regulatory bodies, and all acts and proceedings performed or taken pursuant thereto be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we know the voting results for this item on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, shareholders owning 3,649,110,574 shares, representing 74.13% of 4,922,324,907 total outstanding shares represented in this meeting, voted in favor of the approval and ratification of all acts, contracts, deeds, and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers of the Corporation since the last annual stockholders meeting and up to today's meeting.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is carried. We come now to the election of the directors for the 2021 to 2022 term. 11 seats in the board are available to be filled up. May I know from the Corporate Secretary the list of nominees for election as members of the Board of Directors for the 2021 to 2022 term?
The following individuals were nominated for election as members of the Board of Directors for the 2021-2022 term. They were qualified by the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee of the Corporation. Each nominee, if elected, will serve as director for 1 year, beginning today, until his successor is duly elected and qualified in accordance with the bylaws of the Corporation. Mr. Gerardo O. Lanuza Jr., Mr. Antonio O. Olbes, Mr. Gerardo Domenico Antonio V. Lanuza, Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., Mr. Edmundo C. Medrano, Mr. Gregory G. Young, Mr. Andrew C. Nam, Mr. Amador C. Bacani, and for independent directors, Mr. Renato G. Nunez, Mr. Jomark O. Arolado, and Mr. Alfonso Martin E. Esmendi. The names of the nominees and their qualifications are provided in the definitive information statement submitted by the corporation to the SEC.
Mr. Chairman, I move that all the nominees for the members of the Board of Directors be declared as duly elected directors of the corporation to serve as such for 1 year beginning today until their successors are duly elected and qualified. I am Ms. Maria Cristina Perillo, a proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am Mr. Dennis Aguilar, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that all the nominees be declared as duly elected directors of the corporation to serve as such for 1 year beginning today until their successors are duly elected and qualified in accordance with the bylaws of the corporation. Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The motion is carried. There being enough seats on the board to be filled up by all the 11 nominees, the following are elected as directors of the corporation to serve for 1 year term. Myself, Gerardo Domenico V. Lanuza, Gerardo Ortigas Lanuza Jr., Antonio Olbes, Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., Edmundo C. Medrano, Gregory G. Yang, Andrew C. Nang, Amador C. Bacani, and independent directors, namely Renato G. Nunez, Jomark O. Arrollado, and Alfonso Martin Esmendi. The corporate secretary is directed to apply the votes received in favor of the 11 nominees who are all deemed duly elected members of the board of directors of Philippine Realty and Holdings Corporation. Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, all votes cast and received by the corporation's stock and transfer agent have been applied. Each of the 11 nominees has received 3,649,110,574 votes, representing 74.13% of 4,922,324,907 total outstanding shares represented in this meeting.
On behalf of the members of the previous board of directors and the members of the new board of directors, allow me to express our gratitude for the trust and confidence that the stockholders have reposed upon us. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the amendments of the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws of the corporation. Mr. Corporate Secretary, will you please enlighten our shareholders on this item on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment to the Articles of Incorporation pertains to Article 4, changing the corporate term from 50 years to perpetual in compliance to SEC Memorandum Circular Number 22, Series of 2020, with the subject Guidelines on Corporate Term. On the other hand, the amendment to the bylaws pertain to Article 3, Section 3, clarifying the duty of the President to preside at all meetings of the Board of Directors and the stockholders in case the chairman and the vice chairman are absent. Both amendments were discussed and unanimously approved by the Board of Directors during its regular meeting held on March 16, 2021. The full text of the said amendments and explanations are provided in the definitive information statement and included in the notice of stockholders meeting submitted by the corporation to the SEC. That is all, Mr. Chairman.
The chair will now entertain a motion for the approval of the amendments of the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws of the corporation.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the amendment to Article 4 of the Articles of Incorporation and the amendment to Article 3, Section 3 of the bylaws of the corporation, as recorded in the minutes of the board meeting on March 16, 2021, and all resolutions, actions, or proceedings taken by the Board of Directors or officers of the corporation pursuant thereto be approved, ratified, and confirmed.
I second the motion. I am Ms. Maria Cristina Perillo, a proxy holder.
Has been moved and seconded that the amendments to Article 4 of the Articles of Incorporation and the amendment to Article 3, Section 3 of the bylaws of the corporation, as recorded in the minutes of the board meeting on March 16, 2021, and all resolutions, actions, or proceedings taken by the Board of Directors or officers of the corporation pursuant thereto be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may you have the voting results. May we have the voting results for this item on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to report that shareholders owning 3,649,110,574 shares, representing 74.13%, or more than two-thirds of the 4,922,324,907 total outstanding shares represented in this meeting, voted in favor of the approval of the amendment to Article 4 of the Articles of Incorporation. The same number and percentage of votes were cast in favor of the approval of the amendment to Article 3, Section 3 of the bylaws of the corporation. I therefore certify that the two-thirds votes requirement of the revised corporation code has been met for both amendments.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is carried. The next item on our agenda is the appointment of external auditor of the corporation for 2021 to 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully move that Maceda, Valencia and Company be appointed as the external auditor of the corporation for 2021 and 2022, subject to such terms and conditions as may be imposed by the Board of Directors. I am Mr. King Anthony Tan, a proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am Ms. Maria Cristina Perillo, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that Maceda, Valencia and Company be appointed as the external auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year, subject to terms and conditions as may be imposed by the Board of Directors. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we have the voting results for this item on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, shareholders owning 3,649,110,574 shares, representing 74.13% of 4,922,324,907 total outstanding shares represented in this meeting, voted in favor of the appointment of Maceda, Valencia and Company as the external auditor of the corporation for the 2021-2022, subject to such terms and conditions as may be imposed by the Board of Directors.
Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The motion is carried. Mr. Corporate Secretary, are there other matters that require consideration by the shareholders?
Mr. Chairman, there is none.
There being none, we can now address the questions, comments, and clarifications from the stockholders. Our Senior Manager and Business Development Officer, Mr. Rosana Santos, will read the questions, comments, or clarifications together with the names of the stockholders who sent them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first question we have is from Mr. Lawrence Sandejas Proxy. The question reads, what were specific hurdles that the company encountered while managing last year's crisis? What has made the company survive or even thrive despite the economic crisis?
May I request our CEO, Mr. Alfredo Del Rosario Jr., to respond to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As our chairman and I remarked earlier, like the other industries, the real estate sector has been adversely affected by the pandemic, especially in terms of how we operate and reach our clients. Given the heightened restrictions and lockdowns, it became difficult for us to schedule viewings and to close sale transactions. What the pandemic forced us to do is to step back and recalibrate our operational and sales and marketing processes. In order to address the challenge of reaching out to our clients, we turned to the use of online platforms such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams and other digital tools to continuously communicate with our market. We also had to postpone construction of planned projects until we are confident that the situation has clarified. We expect, with great hope, some normalcy by the end of the 2021. Meanwhile, we had to modify our plans to adjust with the evolving conditions. Of high priority to us was to maintain stability, which will allow us to resume our regular business operations with the minimum disruption when the condition normalizes. Organizationally, we implemented and continue to have a work from home setup and keep a skeleton workforce in our office in One Balete, Quezon City. This ensures that operations can continue while lessening exposure of our employees to the virus. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Del Rosario. We have another question, this time coming from the proxy of Mr. Benedict Sandejas. The question is, how can you ensure that the business will continue and grow from here on out?
Mr. Del Rosario,
Yes.
would you kindly respond to the question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We believe that there are two aspects that would ensure business continuity. The first is the people behind the business. From our board members to the management committee to our sales associates and staff, all of us are committed to being in the service of all our clients and stakeholders, not losing sight of our general objective, which is to generate value for all. We need to be loyal to and passionate with the work that we do. The second aspect is ensuring the appropriate combination of our projects' quality and value. We are keen on further developing our properties as well as expanding our company's footprint by building new ones. We are confident that the lineup of our projects, while still belonging to the luxury segment, would continue to generate demand from new sets of audience, thereby expanding our reach, increasing our relevance, and strengthening our brand. And as mentioned earlier, we will continue to adapt to the changing times. In the process, we will optimize the use of our present technologies, as well as harnessing our human resources to generate sales and revenue and to effectively control our expenses. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Del Rosario for bringing light to the matter. Mr. Chairman, we have no more questions.
There being no other questions from stockholders, the chair will now entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the meeting be adjourned. I am Mr. Joey Jimena, a proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am Mr. Dennis Aguilar, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the meeting be adjourned. Are there any objections? There being none, the meeting is adjourned. We will be posting a link of the recorded meeting on our website at www.philrealty.com.ph. Stockholders may raise any issues, clarifications, and concerns on the meeting conducted by sending an email to corporate secretary@philrealty.com.ph. Thank you for joining us.